Good afternoon, everyone. We're thrilled that you're all here and joined us late in the afternoon. I'm Tony Profit. I'm the Chief Equality Officer of Salesforce. And we've got an amazing panel set up for you this afternoon. And I'm confident you're going to enjoy this. And our topic this afternoon, this late afternoon, is the role of business in driving equality. Driving equality, obviously, in the business community. And we also want to talk about, more broadly, the impact that businesses can have driving equality more broadly in society. And so I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves a little bit and tell a little bit about their own personal story and their own equality journey, and we'll start from there, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the invite. It's great to be here. I'm Richard Bevan. I'm the Distribution Director of Swinton Insurance, which is a major UK insurance broker. I also am on the board of Stonewall, the LGBT charity, and I founded something called Link, which is an LGBT insurance network to help people in insurance. My personal journey, I was married until I was 40 to a woman. I'm now openly gay. I have 4 kids who we are the UK equivalent of the US modern family, and we all get on amazingly well together. So I've been really lucky to have a journey that hasn't been like so many, but in a very good place.
Thank you, Richard. We're thrilled you're here. Vivian.
I'm Vivian Ming. I'm a theoretical neuroscientist and an entrepreneur. I do a lot of different work having to do with how do we very literally make better people. And I get to do it in all sorts of contexts, and so thrilled to be here and work on it here. My personal journey was I started my career as a scientist at UC Berkeley, and right in the middle of that experience as a scientist, I came out to my then fiance and said, if you want to know my deep, dark secret, I wish I was a woman. And I didn't intend for it to happen, but clearly things happened. And the amazing thing is everything about my life took off from that point. I'm not saying it was easy. I'm not saying that there weren't amazing hurdles to overcome. But every good, big thing I've done in my life has been as me. If I hadn't gone through that change, I'd still be a neuroscientist doing interesting research at UC Berkeley. Nowadays, I have the chance to work with Salesforce, to work with the previous White House, and really have a chance to affect change in the world.
And Vivian, this is our second panel together, and you're a personal hero to me. I just wanted you to know that. So we're really glad you could join us.
Thank you very much.
Just love what you do and what you stand for. So thank you. Okay, Jackie.
I'm Jackie Fast. I am the founder and managing director of a sponsorship agency, which is based in London but has offices worldwide. We basically help people find sponsorship from big events like Formula One and the Volvo Ocean Race to conferences and charities. In terms of diversity, my personal stance on it is slightly different probably than the rest of the panel, but diversity is, really, quite frankly, it's about diversity, and my stance is about ageism. So I set up my agency when I was 25 years old because I couldn't get a job in sponsorship because everybody thought I was too inexperienced for the roles that I was going for. Similar to the story that we had, I sent out loads and loads of CVs, and nobody took my calls. Nobody even wanted to pick up the phone. And rather than try to beat down the doors, I went and set up my own agency with £2,000 and a laptop in my bedroom. 7 years on, it's one of the most influential sponsorship agencies globally. So that was where I was coming from. And then having spoken to the lovely panelists, I started getting quite fired up about women and the issue of diversity with gender equality. I also speak on a lot of kind of women in high growth types of things in entrepreneurship. And for me personally, those are probably the panels I don't like to speak about because I'd rather be invited to speak about a person in a high growth industry rather than have to be a woman in high growth where I get invited to speak. So I'm thrilled to be here talking about diversity.
Thank you, Jackie. And Brianne Marie.
Thanks, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a really good day. I'm a banker. I work at Barclays, one of Salesforce's long-standing clients. And I'm actually delighted to be on a stage that has the Salesforce logo on, given what your CEO did to stand up for people in the LGBT community last year. It was genuinely humbling. So my story is I've built my career at Barclays. I've been there for 17 years, done a number of different roles. I'm a passionate advocate for fairness, and this has driven me to do a lot of work, particularly to support women, both in our firm and in the broader community. And in 2014, I was honored to be awarded the Barclays Woman of the Year award. Jackie, I'm sure we'll get into that later about whether it was just Person of the Year award, but I still, I took the tiara that was offered. And decided at that point that I wanted to use that platform to really change something. And I looked around and I actually became acutely aware of the privileges that I have. I am a woman, but I'm also Caucasian and I'm straight. And I thought, rather than leaning in and continuing to fight the fight for the women in the firm, how about reaching out, looking at some of the people that don't have my advantages? And I was delighted to be made the senior sponsor of our LGBT network, Spectrum, at Barclays, that does some really great work. And since then, I also sit on the advisory board of Outstanding, the LGBT FTSE 100 networking organization. One final thing, Tony, Vivian is a hero of mine too. But I think maybe Jackie is making her way up the rankings based on our earlier conversation.
Awesome, awesome. And so we had a great conversation. We spent a lot of time prepping for this. And one thing was clear is we weren't really unanimous on the notion of the business case. And the aspects of it are, how compelling is the business case? How well received is it? Universally received? Do you even still need to make an argument for a business case, or does everyone already get it, that there's a clear business case for equality, a clear business case for diversity and for inclusion in business and at society at large? So I'd like to just turn it to the panelists and just kind of share your view of where are we at on that journey to where you don't need to make the business case. Are you there? And
Yep.
what have you seen working, and where have you seen the business case?
I think I'm bored of having to keep remaking the business case. We don't have to keep remaking the business case to hire straight white men, but we do to keep saying that diversity and inclusion is important, and we have to keep making it. And there's plenty of evidence. It's not being acted on. I think for me, the whole question though is about how do businesses that are, particularly in my industry, needing to change, how do we attract talent? How do we bring the talented future into our organization if we have an organization that appears to be exclusive, an organization that doesn't look to be welcoming? And I was at University of Nottingham last week talking to students, asking, how many of you want to work in financial services? Out of about 100, 6 hands went up. How many of you want to work in insurance? All hands went down. Terrifying me, because these are really talented young people that we need to attract. And we just look like a really boring, really dull organization that's all very stereotypical. Unfortunately, it is. So for me, it's not making the business case. It's for me, how do we attract talent into our industry, which is going to dramatically change over the next few years. And just here at Salesforce, just looking at the technology that's sitting out there that I've been wandering around seeing. The insurance industry is years behind, but it's coming up the rails really fast. And I said at our main insurance conference last week, there are probably half of the industry that's currently employed will not be employed in it in 5 years. And that's a scary thought. And we need, therefore, to attract talent and bring in new types. So bored of the business case, but it's there. I just want to make sure that we attract the right people.
And backstage, Richard, you highlighted some of the roles, how different the roles, where the growth actually is and where you're hiring.
Yeah.
And if you had said, and many of them are technology-based, right?
Absolutely. I said to the student I was talking to, I said, I bet you kind of no idea the last sort of 5 or 6 roles I've hired into our business. So head of digital, content creators, app developers, and roles like this that people are going, what, you do this in insurance? Yeah, we do. Yeah, I want to build one of the best apps that is out there. I want our poor website to be really effective. Our customers want this, and we need to get there, but we're not going to get there with kind of technology from the 80s and people in that way of thinking. We need to modernize. So yeah, they were really surprised to hear me say these are the sort of people we're bringing in.
And I think when you look at creative talent, which is probably one of the big differentiators in business for the foreseeable future, they want to be celebrated. They want to feel like they're at somewhere special. And whether it's fair or not, we're going to turn the diversity thing on its head here. Whether it's fair or not, when they see a stodgy old industry or they see a certain look to the makeup of a company, they say, this isn't a special place. This is not in touch with the kind of creative people I want to be around. And this goes way beyond corporate responsibility. This, if you can't attract this talent, you might as well start planning the transition for whatever business model is going to replace you.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and there won't be one if we don't do this. And it's really interesting. We're doing a lot, which is unusual for our industry. We're talking to people working in garages with some technology that's really, really cool that no one's thought about could be applied to our industry because we're still very paper-driven. We're still not customer-centric. But some of this stuff applied to insurance, you're thinking, wow, we've got to find ways of these little businesses partnering with these boring old industries to make a difference for customers. And that's unusual because walking in suits with grey hair to this wonderful woman that runs these two people running this amazing technology company, we look like from different planets.
Richard, the sort of last decade of numerous studies that have made that business case that, particularly there's more data around gender, I guess, because the discussion has been ongoing for longer. But, ever since Catalyst and McKinsey came out with their reports 10 years ago, saying that if you've got more senior women at the top of your organization, you are likely to outperform your competitors against a whole bunch of financial and economic metrics. There are also some reports coming out now about how that also drives greater innovation and more creativity. And actually, one of my favorites is a Norwegian study showing if you have more women on your board, you're more effective as a board because you're less likely to have fights. I don't know how they measured that one, but it's not linear. But the point I really wanted to make about the business case, and I share your slightly bored with the whole thing at this point, but it isn't really working as a really motivational tool to make people behave differently. And don't get me wrong, we've come a really long way, but it was this 2011 that Lord Davis of Abergavenny came out with his report saying that the UK FTSE 100 companies should have at least 25% women on their boards. And we kind of hit that 2015, and we've stagnated ever since. The number of women on senior management teams has stagnated for the last 8 years at below 20%. And as the former Equality Minister, Nicky Morgan, said so memorably last summer, the men are still on the boards, are still holding onto they've got a tight grip on those positions of greatest power. And there are still more people who are chairing FTSE 100 boards who are called John than there are women, which is great news if you're called John. But clearly there isn't a John quota that we should be aiming for here. Right. And so the point I think I'm making about going on, but the point about the business case is if that's not what's going to actually motivate people into action, what is? And I believe it's the personal stories. None of us have gotten involved on our, equality and diversity and inclusion stories because there was a great stat that really hit home, right? It was our own personal experience, our own personal stories, and I do think one of the biggest change that we could all do within our organization is have those authentic conversations about what inclusion does mean for us, and be brave and be vulnerable, but let people know that it is important to you as an individual.
And Emery, I want to come back to the board representation.
Sure.
And because one of the things that's notable, here in the UK is this 30%, initiative. And so what's the panelists broadly, I mean, what's your view of the impact on that and the importance of it? And, is that a catalyst for later change?
Well, I'll take that one quickly. The 30% group, and Helena Morrissey's done some incredible work. A lot of it was based on these reports and the data that was coming out saying that actually for the women to actually engender real change at the board level, just having one token minority didn't work, that you actually needed to have a 30% sort of that was your special trigger point, at which point they were actually driving behavioral change and driving different outcomes. And that they've done some great work. As I say, we've met the 25% target. Unfortunately, since then we've stagnated a bit, and the FTSE 250 still needs a lot of work. But certainly it's been a force for good, and it elevated the dialogue. It's certainly elevated the dialogue in the country.
So I was on the advisory board at Credit Suisse when we released a report where we showed that having at least one woman on the board on 4 different metrics increased return to shareholders by 3%. If you had at least 5 women on the board, it increased the return. If you had at least 3 women on the board, it increased the return up to 5%. And largely, this actually has some ties back to now I'm seeing the all-male boardrooms as like these saloons where there's just brawls going on. But it had to do with, largely with malfeasance and over-aggressive investment strategies, bad acquisitions. There were some systematic differences in having women. What was really interesting is in some personal research I've done since, where we analyzed 60,000 companies, looking at what was predictive of wage gap, and some work of my own on what we call the tax on being different, we found that when a new woman entered the board or the C-suite, there was a causal relationship with a decrease in wage gap and tax in the year subsequent to that. And the most important roles, unfortunately, weren't the boards where we were making more progress. It was having women coming in at business roles on the executive team. That had a very pronounced effect. 2 companies that were doing equitable, what we might call diversity spend, the more women you had in those executive roles, the more impact those initiatives meant.
That's compelling.
When we talk about this, though, and I'm certainly not against women on boards. I'm obviously running my own business, and I sit on a board. But you start saying, well, we have to have 30% of women on boards. Well, why don't we talk about, well, we have to have 30% of Chinese people on boards. We have to have 30% of gay people. And then you start looking at women as a specific sector of people that have to have 30% or 50% or whatever because it's good for business. Actually, diversity goes beyond just gender. And I think you start sectoring stuff like that off, you're missing the point of diversity, I think.
And how do you see it from a perspective of an entrepreneur?
Sorry?
The journey with equality and diversity from an entrepreneurial perspective.
For me personally, so most of my company, I work in sponsorship, which is predominantly sport. And the majority of the people that are my competitors are guys who love sport. So, the CEO of the FA Cup basically says you can't work in football unless you love football. I couldn't even tell you a team, basically. So I know nothing about sport. But the benefit and the reason that we've been successful is not because I'm a woman. It's because actually my take about sponsorship and sports sponsorship specifically is very different because I didn't sit there watching the game. I don't have a passion about sport. I have a passion about collaboration and business and sponsorship. And that has accelerated our business beyond people that care about football. And so diversity for me, it's more than gender. It's about different viewpoints that add value to the growth of a business.
I agree, and I think going back to the point you're making at the outset, Tony, about how business can impact society more broadly, obviously by aiming to have greater opportunity at the top of organizations and provide those role models, not just for women, but for LGBT, for people in ethnic minorities as well, that has an even broader impact on the society. It doesn't just send a strong signal out to women saying, these are aspirational roles for you, go to university, try your best, work at big organizations, go, set up your own company. It's also the same for people who also come from completely other backgrounds. So it's, when we start looking at diversity, it's age, it's ethnic minorities, it's also people that come from more disadvantaged backgrounds who may not have had that more traditional education path. But it can only help in making people make better creative choices and in actually attracting the right talent because people can see that people can succeed whilst being their authentic selves.
Yeah. Just on that, we just talked about the fact that in 5 years, the majority of your people won't even be there. And yet you probably have a board that doesn't have anybody under 50 or 60 on the board. And so if you're talking about change and impact and you're saying we need to bring on talent, and yet you're not even bringing on people at that kind of high level to look at how you bring on younger talent. There's just for me, there's a very big disconnect between what you want to achieve and actually putting that in practice.
I agree, and yeah, we are in the middle of changing some board members. We'll see where that goes. But I think for me, and picking up on your point of earlier, it's a lot about diversity of thinking. Yeah. I worked at Reuters, and I would say that's a really, truly global company, and it's as diverse on every metric that ever worked. We had the best meetings because the difference of thinking I never sat at a meeting with everybody from the UK. It was from all over the world. I never sat in an all-male meeting. I never sat in a meeting with everybody around the same age. We had completely different conversations. We thought about risk differently, and that for me is what this is all about. It's about how do we get diversity of thinking into organizations who don't just all make decisions in the same way. And I think that's the risk point for me, is that it doesn't matter whether you've got 30% women and however many percent men, because if they all think the same way and make their decisions the same way, you're not going to have a better business outcome. And that's what I think is really important, and how do you get the diversity of thinking? And it doesn't matter if they're old or young.
And Vivian is the only neuroscientist here, right, that I know of, right? This diversity of thinking, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so, we frequently call it cognitive diversity. Perhaps a less wonky name would be creative diversity. This is what we're talking about. Most of the rest of it is just a proxy. It turns out it's a pretty good proxy. People from different backgrounds are very likely to think about the world differently, and so it's not unreasonable that we can take these very clear signals and act on them. But when you bring a team together, you see better creative problem solving on teams that have creatively, cognitively diverse components. They could be all white men, they could be all women, they could be wildly diverse. The only thing that they really need to have is trust and communication. If you can bring that diverse team together and build that trust and communication, they will outperform the homogeneous team.
Yeah. And I want to briefly, just on a personal note, go back to the board diversity. I sit on a public company board, and it's quite diverse. So there's 2 blacks on the board and 3 women on the board. And I was on the nominating committee that constituted the board. And so we did this very deliberately, and it's created this amazing, collaborative, rich dialogue and chemistry that I'm super proud to be a part of. So let's pivot now and talk a little bit about tactics and strategies, and if we're trying to affect an outcome in an organization, large or small, growing or not. What are some of the things that you've seen that you'd recommend that work? What are some of the things you say, wouldn't do these again? Maybe Richard, start with you.
Yeah, a few things that I think work done well, and I think this is really important. None of these are sticking plasters. So I think role models have a really important part to play. People who understand, who are prepared to stand up and be counted to be themselves, again, as long as it's done in the right way, and actually you're role modeling the behaviors that you want to see, as opposed to, be like me and it's all going to be great. And we've had a few misfires on that, but I'm absolutely convinced that's a good thing. I think just finding ways to talk, and I'm so pleased that I could be on this panel today, so pleased that I could talk at our industry conference and things like that, because it matters, and I think finding ways to do that. I think why we set up Link, for example, creating an organization, it was terrifying in insurance to look at the data around people, openly gay university students coming into insurance and then going back into the closet because it was unsafe. There was nowhere to talk. 4 of us in a pub set this up. It's now got 600 active members, people who have now openly gay at work, because we then worked with their organizations when they told us, this is what's going on in X, Y, and Z firm. So I phoned up the CEO and said, this is what I'm hearing. No, it can't be like this. And I said, but I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I'm going to tell you this is what we're hearing. And things have started to move. So I think 3 things for me are worth doing, and slowly it's starting to make a difference.
Do you find people, when they're confronted with reality, generally, open to change, or do you see people being...
Yeah, I think it's very tempting, certainly when you're at C-level, to kind of believe that you've set out a diversity and agenda, and you've set maybe some stats around it, and you think we've done the good thing. And your people who are reporting to you are telling you we're doing everything we can and it's all great. But actually, where it matters is in the far-flung ops unit, and the gay guy is being abused by a manager locally. that story is not getting up through the organization. So I think some of it feels optically good at the C-suite, but you've got to kind of hear these stories. And then when you hear, these are really talented people that you've recruited into your organization that are going to leave because this is what's really going on, and usually you can get a dialogue going, and usually you can get in, and then you have a conversation, and then you see lots of squeaky bums on chairs because people are saying, we've done it, we thought we'd cracked it, and no, we haven't.
Right. So, Marie, what are some of the strategies and tactics that you've seen work, and some
I'm
things
going to go with the reverse mentoring and the importance of educating yourself, especially with a group which you may not have immediate affinity with. If I may just say a very quick personal story, and it's a bit of a risk because it still chokes me up every time I say this story, so apologies in advance. But I went on an unconscious bias training many years ago at Barclays, something that I think we do quite well. And there was a business leader there who had offered a role, a huge role, to one of his protégés that he'd worked with for many, many years. And the protégé said, I'm going to need a bit of time to think about it. And the business leader was like, is he crazy? This is an incredible overseas posting. This is a big step up for him. Anyway, 5 days later, by which point the business leader was thinking, this guy probably isn't the right person for this role because he should have bitten both my hands off. The person that he had worked with for the best part of 10 years had to come in and say, these last few days have been really difficult. I'm going to have to turn this role down because it is in one of the 74 countries around the world where homosexuality remains illegal. And whilst I've never shared openly at work that I'm a gay man, I cannot move there with my partner. So I've spent the last 5 days thinking, do I resign rather than come to you and show that some of our relationship hasn't been based on trust? And I heard this story, and I've managed to say it without welling up, which I'm quite pleased about, because I just thought this was the most horrible, traumatic story that made... This wasn't a bad guy. He was trying his best, this business leader, to give somebody an opportunity. And I was sitting there full of, I know everything about diversity. I've been doing my gender stuff. I've got an award. And I was sitting there thinking, I know nothing about the challenges and the torment that some of my very colleagues might have. So I signed up at that point to be a Spectrum ally, and I have had a succession of reverse mentors. So young gay and lesbian people in the organization who help me better understand some of the challenges and what I can do using my platform as a more senior leader in the organization to make it more inclusive and make them feel more comfortable. And going back to that terrible business case thing again, improve their productivity at work because they're not using up so much of their emotional bandwidth pretending to be somebody that they're not. So that would be my big thing. And you know, the UN is doing some great work with he for she, asking for men to reach out and support women in organizations. And a large part of it is education, understanding what are the challenges, how are other people's careers trajectories different, and how do they experience the workplace differently to maybe the way you or I do. So that would be my one take.
And Jackie, what strategies, tactics do you see in your world, and do you see them being different in an entrepreneurial space than in a large...
Yeah, so like, you know, I don't come from Barclays or even Swinton, and I'm at the top. So I can make decisions and follow them through. But one of the things that I thought was quite interesting, so from my personal experience, I really take offense to young people not being given the opportunity. Even though they may not have 50 years experience, they may still have the right skill set, or at least for me, enthusiasm, to go and do something that maybe other people haven't done. And so I've always made sure that we create big internship programs. We create lots of opportunities for young people to have really influential roles and be very, very influential with the clients that we work with. But 4 months ago, probably I looked around and everybody was under 28. And we've just gone and hired our first 55-year-old intern. Because, you know, ageism goes both ways. And we are a really young, dynamic agency, and I think, you know, we haven't seen what's going to happen with that, but even having a different viewpoint. And she loves being there, you know. She loves it. She thinks it's young and dynamic, and, you know, she sits there writing most of stuff. I'm like, you know, Jennifer, you can use the computer to do a lot of this stuff. But, you know, and we're creating opportunities for her to grow her skills as well as us learning. So I think I think it's kind of to Richard's point, really, really taking a look at, you know, making sure it's not whitewash. And again, I stick to diversity accelerates business growth, and diversity in all forms.
And what are some of the things when you're out recruiting and you're doing it in this entrepreneurial world, what are some of the things you see and hear and learn that can maybe inform us more broadly from the talent that's out there?
I think, what I have learned is younger talent, in talking about recruiting millennials, and I think it was mentioned, I'm not sure on this panel or the other, younger people really want to work for a business that cares about the world. They are more invested in organizations giving back than I've ever seen before. And that is a crazy differentiator from even my time when I was applying for roles, and I'm sure my parents' generation, and beyond that. And I think that is something that businesses will have to take into account. And so diversity, sustainability, stuff like this is becoming so important to get the talent because it's so important to them. And I do feel that if you're not creating the roles or creating the company that people want to work for, they will go and they will start their own to create an environment in a workplace where they feel comfortable and they're making a difference.
Yeah. Vivian, what are some of the strategies, tactics? What's the data behind it?
So I founded 7 companies, and it is never easy. Founding tech companies in Silicon Valley, having to recruit against Salesforce, having to recruit against Google, having to recruit against people to throwing down bonuses that we could never compete with. And I'm going to share a really abbreviated version of a story I was sharing backstage. There's this young kid, grew up in LA, named Jade Dominguez, self-taught programmer. Never went to college, never worked a corporate job, was sending resumes up to Silicon Valley for a year, getting no responses at all. And one day he gets a call from this startup and says, "Hey Jade, our algorithm tells us you're the 2nd best Ruby developer in all of Los Angeles. Can we fly you up here for a job interview?" So that was us, and that was an algorithm that my team built to figure out how good people were at jobs. Take bias out of the hiring process. All I care about is you will be an awesome front-end developer, which he was for 2 years before he left and founded his own company. We didn't do a favor to him. We did a favor to ourselves. We couldn't get his level of talent coming out of Stanford. We needed to look someplace different, with someone that could bring a different perspective, but equal qualifications to the job. But here is the finisher to the story I didn't share backstage. His first winter, he went home for Christmas, came back, and said 2 things. First thing is his dad saw how much he was getting paid, and his dad said, "I have never earned that much money in my whole life." But the other was he was hanging out in the neighborhood with his old friends, and they said, "You are the first person we've ever known who's worked in Silicon Valley." Mm-hmm. So it turns out that there's whole amazing research about kids just like Jade choosing not to go to college, choosing they have some opportunity available to them, but they don't take it because it doesn't feel like it's ever going to make a difference in their life. Why bother? I'm still going to end up back in the neighborhood. Now Jade is the concrete example in those kids' life that that's not true. And I'm not just talking as an anecdote. It's been researched. It is the #1 predictor of people from any underrepresented population. Women are a majority population, so minority, majority, doesn't matter. Underrepresented, the #1 predictor that they choose to participate, they choose to contribute, the incredible talent that they bring is a belief that their work will pay off, that they knew someone like Jade from their neighborhood that had come before them. When you reach out and you run those internships, you find people that are totally qualified. You value them. It doesn't just transform their lives, it transforms every life that they touch.
There's so much to love about that story. I love the idea of I take great optimism from the idea that we'll have algorithms that will be able to take the bias out of the equation going forward, and making sure that we genuinely are hiring in a meritocratic way with people with the right skills, and unfortunately not just offering opportunity to those, or promotions to those who can self-promote most effectively, which is something I think biases against a lot of people who are underrepresented. But I think the other point Tony mentioned earlier about the 30% Club and the work that they did, they published quite an interesting kind of how-to guide a few years ago called Crack the Code. And one of the points in there was the point about role models and the importance of seeing sort of these superhuman, high-achieving role models that reach the echelons of organizations. And that can be very inspiring in a way because you can see that people can succeed. But actually, it's having that local, immediately accessible role model, that person who's just those few steps ahead of you, who's showing you the way, that has a far greater impact on women's careers and their ability to succeed in large organizations.
Yeah, that's a super powerful story. I love that. I love that. So as we close the panel, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to offer some advice and pick the persona. If it's talent that's coming up and coming talent, someone that's trying to reinvent their career, leaders at the top. I mean, if you had the top 2 or 3 pieces of advice, what advice would you offer to the audience to take away and something that's actionable they can do to really make a difference in advancing the cause of equality? And just jump in the order.
Go to a school. The work we do at Stonewall in schools, I've been to schools, talk in schools, and there's another charity I work with called Diversity Role Models. Working in schools, it starts there. And the more we can do to educate and inform through schools, the better it is. And when you have those conversations at schools and you listen to kids just subtly their whatever influences their inbuilt homophobia, their inbuilt racism, whatever, once they start to talk about it in the right sort of way, it falls away really quickly. So for me, encouraging anybody to spend some time in schools for me is a great thing, and work with a charity that can help you, get educated to do that and get out there and see these amazing kids and what they're doing and help them understand. For me, I come away from it feeling inspired every time and thinking, my God, we're very negative in this country about our education system, but we've got brilliant kids and we just need to help them with some of their prejudice that they're learning in their family environment perhaps, and just talk about it. It's great.
Thank you, Richard.
So we are going to go in order.
Okay.
So I had the privilege of giving the convocation at my alma mater, University of California, and I had 3 little lessons. Without context, they may seem strange, but bear with me. The first one was, whatever you're doing right now, whether you love it or not, go all in. Be great at it. I hate to think how many people have walked away from things they could be great at because they didn't love it on day one. Be great at it. People value that greatness. That opens doors, and it totally changes the game. I'm not here because of whatever crazy thing. I'm here because I know how to build AI, and that is something people will buy no matter what craziness is going on in your life. The second one is construct a purpose. There isn't one thing you're meant to do in your life. Go out and build that purpose. And this comes from science also. People that serve a purpose earn more money. They go further in the education. They literally live longer. Follow that purpose throughout your lifetimes. The last one involved a dirty word, which I don't know if is appropriate to address here, but let's just say I've lived a lot of different lives. My strong recommendation is to go out there and live as many lives as possible. Don't care what anyone else thinks, and I mean that strongly. Be willing to tell your boss no and your parents no. Do what you believe in. I think one of these things at an individual level that really can drive bringing a powerful, diverse team together, in fact, it's a requirement for it to have the potential to really change the game, is everyone is honest and they're telling what they really think and they're not afraid of the repercussion. So the line is just fucking die already and then reincarnate and start all over again, over and over again throughout your life.
I'd say believe and implement. I think, believe that diversity is the future of individual growth as well as business growth. The world is getting smaller. Technology has enabled us to communicate with diverse walks of life from all over the place. So if you are a business, and business is wholly about connection and communication, and if you can't embrace that, you are not going to be a business that grows. But it's more than just believing in it. You have to implement it. And implementation is not necessarily from the top down. Implementation can be within your social circle. Implementation can be within your group in terms of whether you're a manager, whether you work at McDonald's. Implementation can be anything. It doesn't have to start at board level. So those would be mine.
I'm going to go for two things, and the first one is take steps to fulfill your own potential. And by that, I mean let one of your key stakeholders know, the person who can actually influence your career, what it is you want to be doing and what it is you could be doing. Because from personal experience, I've worked for some incredible line managers in my time. Not one of them was able to read my mind. So let somebody know what it is you feel you're capable of doing and what you want to be doing. And the second one is help someone else fulfill their potential. Go out and sponsor somebody today. And I don't mean like, help them run a marathon or something. It's like, go and not just mentor someone, which is the concept of helping someone help themselves, but you all know somebody who is great at their job, who maybe isn't getting quite the opportunities or the profile or the network that they could. Help them do that. Use your network to shout about somebody else that you know, be they a woman, or be they an LGBT colleague, or be they Black or ethnic minority, or whatever. Go and make sure that you open your network up to them and that you let people know how fantastic they are. So that'd be my two things.
That's a brilliant note to end on. And so this has been a really special day for us here in London. And this is a unique opportunity to spend time with our customers, with our partners, with the MVPs. And we're really deeply grateful for the time that you all invested with us here today. We hope you've enjoyed the day as much as we have, and that this last vignette at the end has helped in your mind to advance, to crystallize at least, the cause of equality. And we're hoping all of you march out and are more of an equality advocate than you were 45 minutes ago. So we want to thank you, and hopefully you join me in thanking the panel for their tremendous contribution today.